Sahana Bhavatu, Sahano Bhunaktu, Saharavahai, Tejasvina Vadhitamastu, Ma Vidvishawahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Welcome back to session 4. Last week, we have spoken of verse 1, and we finished verse 1, and we said that Dhritarashtra was born blind. Now, when we say blind, don't just think of it as like physically blind. Otherwise, it becomes a simple teaching. It's physically blind person. Blind means the person willingly, by their choice, or through their consistent engagement with the world in a certain manner, chooses to remain in a state of mind which doesn't let him enter more considerations, doesn't let him consider different perspectives of life. So in that sense, Dhritarashtra can also be, quote, blind. And he said to Sanjaya, verse 1 stated, he said, O Sanjaya, do tell what series of events have unfolded for my people and the illustrious Pandavas to come to this place where the series of events have unfolded in a manner that all of this has taken place. What has unfolded so that all of this has come to be? And Dhritarashtra was portrayed as someone who is an archetype, and he is keeping this discontent within himself because he's unable to, for various reasons, unable to say what he really wants to say. And we also said that he is the character who knew throughout the war that he's on the side, his sons are on the side of adharma, and he's unable to help himself. He's unable to say, stop, this is not right, this needs to change, or something's off here, and we need to sit down together, and we need to have a discussion, and we need to be honest and recognize, is our current actions, our behavior, our words, is this serving the larger whole, or is it serving one side at the expense of the other? And if it's serving our side at the expense of the other, then what is the cost long-term for this continuing to be so? So this never happened. And then the question that we posed was, why is this? And the answer was that we said there are several reasons. One of them is that he was attached naturally to his family. So he said things like, I was born blind, and I had a desire, I had a fulfillment of, to exercise, but I could not because I was born blind. And so naturally, this will create a discontent character in life. And so through this discontent, we, start to look at the world for ways to please ourselves, because we justify, we say, well, after all, the world hasn't served me very well, and I'm going to find anything to fulfill me. Whatever is available, I will have that. That will be good enough for me. So this is one of those situations where the person comes with a world, or in a family or a situation, and the circumstances unfold such that you naturally want to please yourself because you've been suppressed, and now you're in the position of the king, and you want to kind of, use an opportunity to exercise your needs because they have been suppressed for such a long time. So one of the reasons was that he was emotionally attached to his family. And in fact, that's the second reason. So the first reason we said that is he has this need for personal fulfillment, and he was secretly living through his son or his daughter or whoever's involved to exercise his wishes. The second reason was that he has an emotional connection to his family. And this is very understandable because you know these people, you know who your people are, and you are naturally emotionally connected to them, and there is a self-interest to protect them. However, what can happen is this can come at the cost of disregarding the larger whole. One time when I was returning back from Bali, as an example, I was at the airport and returning back to Australia, and you have to naturally put your passport in to, go through the customs. And there was a long line of people, because we all got out of the airport. And so we were waiting behind the counter, those portable counters, to put our passport and get a ticket. and then we can carry this ticket through the gate. And there was one family, it was a mom and a dad and 2 kids, and they were young. And the kid's passport was not working. So the mother was, very stressed out, and she, put this passport in about 10 times and it's not working. And she just moves the person, because there's 2 counters, right? One counter's here, one counter, so they're all in a line. And she just moves, she goes to the next counter and she moves the person, and she just puts the passport in that counter. And then she goes to the next counter, moves that person, puts the passport of her child into that counter. Total disregard. And we were just watching this going, my God, this woman has no connection to what is going. There's like a line, hundreds of people behind us. And someone stood up and said, this is inappropriate. There is actually people here. And her husband just swore at him. And I was just looking at this whole situation, and I thought, what an example where, right, you have a family, 2 kids, mom and a dad, and they're all, seemingly happy, but it comes at the cost of disregarding everyone else because you're so comfortable and it's about my child. We have to do what we have to do. And I was asking myself, if that woman and that man were by themselves, do you think they would have acted like that? Oh, you see? So in other words, the person that we're with either can give us confidence to support our confidence in the name of disregarding the whole, or that very same person can give us confidence to support ourselves to act in the name of including the whole. So again, it's who you are with also makes a difference. It encourages you to act in a certain way because people that we love are highly influential. Now, Duryodhana was influenced by Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra was influenced by Duryodhana, and that's why he was secretly collaborating with his son. So for these reasons, one of these reasons or more is that he was unable to do anything. The third reason that we said was owing to different biases. And what are these biases? So it's not like these biases are only in the modern psychology. These biases are also pertinent, right? Decades ago, hundreds of years ago. We just bring out these biases in the modern psychology. And what do we call them? We call them confirmation bias. And we said that what is a confirmation bias? Well, it's whereby you have established a certain image or a certain imprint or a certain preference for a lifestyle or a person or a model of the world, how the world is or how people are. And then you go into the world and you ask for confirmation. You're looking for confirmation for other pieces of information to confirm what you have already pre-established in your mind. You understand this? So in other words, I look at books, I look at politicians, I look at all of the media, and I exclude anything that doesn't confirm what I've already chosen to believe or to value out of my own preference at the disregard of the whole. But that doesn't matter. It's for my own preference after all. And so what happens is I disregard anything else that contradicts my own preference, that gives me some emotional satisfaction, that gives me some emotional security, that gives me some, some company, that gives me a sense of belonging to other people. I was watching a show on YouTube where there was a man who decided to look into the lives of gangs who are walking in America, and they were usually in packs, packs of gangs. And usually they have their turfs, right? Their own areas, one over here and the other gang doesn't go across the line. And this man wanted to go inside the inner psychology. Why do you, he asked, go inside these, these gangs, or he didn't call it gangs, but these groups of people where your life is in danger and you just continue to live like this? And most of them said, because I have a sense of brotherhood. I have a sense of belonging, a sense of love. Think about this. So even if they know their life is at stake, they still recognize that there is a sense of, belonging or sense of, I make a bigger contribution to someone. So this need is so strong that it's willing to compromise one's own safety. So in that same manner, Dhritarashtra was under the spell of these psychological biases where his need, in fact, Duryodhana was too, his need for exercising his deep, innate, core yearnings through his son. And Duryodhana also, in the sense, was exercising this, as we will see in the following verses. So what is a confirmation bias? Well, a common thing that we hear is something like, oh, it's my karma. Oh, it's my destiny. You heard this before? Very common. It's my karma. I am hopeless. This is my life. I have no other ways or means. This is how my life is. I've done something long ago. And this is how it's a victim psychology. So the person then walks up, and not that they walk up, but they hear information and capture anything that reinforces that kind of talk. So anyone who speaks, any teacher who speaks in this mode that it is your karma and there's nothing you can do about it, and this is just how it is, you have to ride out your life and wait next life round. All of this talk is very appealing to this kind of individual who's carrying this psychological bias. But this is not what the Veda says at all. In fact, this is a misinterpretation. What the Veda says are things like ask for help. Who can I ask for help? Ask for help through prayer. And then the Vedas explains, how does prayer help? How do you prove that prayer helps? Well, prayer is an action. And any action in this world has a reaction. Any action has an effect. Any cause put into the field, into the Kurukshetra, into the field of action, has some seen or unseen effect. So by putting a prayer into the field, I cannot go without receiving some form of corresponding effect, whether it's immediately recognized, which often isn't, or it is delayed. Now, because it is delayed, I'm able to trace 1 year from now onto the prayers that we have done 1 year before. Then what do we say? Well, prayer doesn't work. Prove it to me. In fact, there was a fella who wrote The God Delusion, Richard Dawkins, and he did a study. He went to the hospital and he wanted to prove, this is confirmation bias, how prayer doesn't work. And he was asking the family members to look at who was praying for their family members. And he basically figured out through his own analysis that those who were praying for their family members in the hospital, those family members did not get better at all. In fact, quote, they got worse. And those who did not pray for their family members in the hospital, they, nothing, they were just continuing to have the same condition. Now, how long did this experiment take place? In a matter of what time span? A week? Are you kidding me? This is not how the order works. You need to wait years, sometimes a decade. So, but doesn't matter, because this is what you call confirmation bias. So this is good enough for me. I will put this inside my book and then I will go and sell it. So what else does Veda says? It says, take responsibility for your life. Rather than saying how I am stuck in these circumstances and there's nothing that I can do, hey, you are given the greatest instrument in this universe. That's called the sophisticated human buddhi, which is capable of sending man to the moon, which is able to ascertain how to send rockets, use the forces of gravity and go against that, use how to make an algorithm to construct AI. Now they're building robots. You will see that coming in the next 10 years. You will have robots cooking in your kitchens, used to figure out, the relativity of space and time, used to figure out so many things in this world, all through the human intellect. In fact, the life that you and I are living now is nothing but a collection of, or assemblage of thousands of minds who have dedicated and used the sophisticated instrument to discover, to make great advancements so that we can be enriched as we are doing so now. I'm speaking to you and you're listening to me. And sometimes it's going to be vice versa. Did you know that right now there are signals, if you're overboard from Australia, there are signals going underneath the ocean floor, big, thick wires, optical cables. And these signals are being converted into zeros and ones. And right now, they're in the form of zeros and ones going thousands of kilometers underneath the ocean. And they're reaching America, Canada, India, and also all over the place. And what are you seeing? Look, there's Andre, color. It's all lovely. Who created these optical fibers? People who spend lifetimes using the sophisticated instrument. In that same manner, you can use that same instrument to change and transform your life. In fact, to accomplish the highest. That means we need to use the instrument responsibly, because that is the very endowment for which you were given this mind. Now I'm given this mind and this instrument, and then I say, no, it's my karma, this is my position, I've got no other way, I'm doomed. Look at this. So this means the Vedas wants to show you, hey, the product of who you are today is the collection of the kinds of thinkings you have engaged in on a consistent basis for the last 5 years, for the last 10 years, for a whole lifetime. And it's never too late, because if I change one little course of my thought or my thinking today, then that's immediately, if you could reach out and look at your timeline, top, bottom, and you look at your timeline, today you make one course correction in your thinking, and if you could, you would see your entire timeline for the next 10 years start to alter already. But because we are a little bit kind of stuck in our little place, we don't see that. So then we say, prayer doesn't work, nothing works, what's the point? It's kind of like being in those birds formations. I was just in the office here and I saw on the sky the bird formation in an arrow like this. You see this? Amazing, right? Now, did they learn a book? Did they go and look at some books to arrange and look pretty for us? No, this is an inbuilt intelligence. Now, for them, it doesn't look like it. The bird's probably thinking, oh my God, I'm so out of place. I don't know. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just following here. And the next bird is probably thinking the same thing. Oh, I'm also following. The bird behind me has a better view. If something hits me, it's going to hit me first, and the bird behind me is going to be safer. So all of birds are carrying these complications in them. And yet, if you look at it from a total standpoint, they are in a perfect unison. So in that same way, your life, our life is also like this. And we need to sometimes look at it from a larger view, which is the whole Gita. The Gita just wants to show you there's a much larger view here. So it allows us to expand our vision and see, my God, my life is already working. But my own pressures step in and they say, no, it's not working. And here's why it's not working. And then you go into confirmation bias. So this is Dhritarashtra. What else does the Vedas say? It says, every once in a while, one needs to reevaluate their life. Reevaluate their life for an hour a week. Something that I've been doing personally, and it just turns out that's exactly what the Vedas are saying. For the last 2 decades, I've been doing every month or even 2 weeks, every 2 weeks, I just have 1.5 hours on my own. And I ask myself like this, Andre, how are you? Is your life okay? Is anything missing? Are you yearning for something? Are your relationships healthy? And if not, what is missing? What could you add and subtract from your experience to bring your life back into harmony? Is there any pains? Do you have any headaches? Do you have any emotional, ongoing, recurring pains that are coming to you? If yes, what is their cause? And what kind of thoughts are you thinking for them to reoccur? What would you have to believe for these thoughts to keep on coming? How are you in respect to other people? Do you feel comfortable in your skin? Do you feel comfortable as a person? If not, what stories are you telling yourself that is causing you to feel like a lesser human being? Are you having a sense of superiority when you speak to people? If yes, why? And how could I think of myself in a way that I can bring myself down back to world? We call this being centered. Am I centered? Am I grounded? Am I with you? Am I above you? Am I below you? How is your life, Andre? Are you okay? Are you feeling okay? Like this, for 20 years, I tell you, every 14 days to 30 days, 1.5 hours, go in a park and just get to know yourself, how you are. We call this self-compassion. How many of us do this? Busy, looking for other things, satisfying others, pleasing others, which is totally okay. But remember, you too have the same instrument which you are pleasing over there. You are given the same instrument. So I cannot say now, everyone else deserves my time, effort, and attention. What about this individual? And tell me this, can you give the best of yourself unless you are feeling congruent and centered in yourself? Can you? Can you give the best of yourself unless you, the giver, are feeling congruent and centered of yourself? You can, but you can give so much more. If you know what is it that you are yearning for, what are your needs? What are my needs? That also has to
Just
be.
like
Yes.
just like they ask you to put on the mask when you are in the flight, and if there is a trouble, you should first be able to take care of yourself before you can take care of others.
Yeah, this is very good. In other words, before we start, because see, our natural disposition is that instantly you want to turn your head and help someone else. But hey, there's a person right here. You take care of yourself first, because when you're able to think clearly, breathe clearly, then you can do the absolute best for someone else, like this. So this is a nice reminder. Every time we go to the airport and they remind us, there's a reason for this. So it's already kind of percolated throughout the society, but when you bring it out like this in the class, there it is. It helps you to recognize that there is an order here which doesn't exclude you, and you are part of this order. Therefore, it doesn't make sense to exclude yourself. Yes, Vic.
So, Andre, what you just described, the scenario you described, if I relate it to this first verse, is we are this Dhritarashtra, and we are checking in with our subconscious as to what's going on with us.
Right.
Would that be a fair comparison, or?
Yeah, I love that metaphor. Yes. Okay, so this is nice what Vic says. You are checking up with yourself. And the reason is because there's, as who is it? Someone else said with the airplane, there's a tendency to want to put attention elsewhere. So, you need to sort of give equal attention to yourself, because after all, you are also here for yourself. You came here to understand the truth. And that requires a certain self-compassion, self-love onto yourself. And the irony is, only when you give to yourself in terms of your physical health, your emotional health, your cognitive health, only then can you really give the fullest to other people. And then they will love you even more, because you're giving them quality. You're not giving them half invested, half or partially given love. You're giving them full attention, full love, full accommodation. And then go, wow, what an amazing individual. And you feel great by that feedback from them. Why? Because it all started with who? Yourself. Is this making sense? Self-love, self-compassion. Is this selfish, what I'm talking about? I'm not talking about selfish.
This is what I meant to ask you. Where is the fine line between being selfish and look after yourself? This is what I'm trying to understand, because if you pay too much attention to yourself.
Right. Excellent. So Ile has asked, what's the fine line between selfish and selfless? So see, when we use these words, there is a place for these two words. Now, in the Vedas, the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, it will say a line, Atmanastu kamaya sarvam priyam bhavati. And what this means is that everyone does everything for their sake alone. Everyone does everything for their sake alone, never for the sake of the other. So if you look at your experience very carefully, why are you loving the other person? Why are you married to the other person? Why do you have a child? Is it for their sake, or is it ultimately to please yourself? I want you to look at this statement very carefully, because it's a very subtle statement. Like, why do you come to this class? Is it to please me, or is it to please yourself? That's easier, right? It's to please yourself. Like, why do you go to work? Is it to please your colleagues, or is it to please yourself? Even if you don't like going to work, you still come to work. Why? Because you want to please yourself in the future. So like this, when is the fine line where it becomes selfish or selfless? So these two terms, look at this. On one hand, the Veda says everything you do is for your sake alone. But then where do I now put these two words, selfish and selfless? Well, they have a context. If you are to the extent to how much you're pleasing yourself at the exclusion of the well-being of others, to that extent, we call it selfish. To the extent to how much I'm pleasing myself naturally, because we all do things to please ourselves, in Amidst that, to the extent to how much I am including the well-being of others, is what we call selfless. So look at this. Selfish and selfless have a certain context. Ultimately, everyone only does things to please themselves alone. You are married because it makes you feel comfortable and it brings you well-being and it brings your partner well-being from their standpoint. You have children because you want to kind of direct your duty to something much higher than just sensual pleasure and, you know, whatever it is, whatever reasons people have for having a child, but there are different reasons. And a lot of it always comes back to, how will this enrich my life? So that's the universal statement. How will this enrich my life? That's the universal statement. To the extent to how much I include others while I'm enriching my life is what we call selfless. To the extent to how much, while I'm enriching my life, exclude others and their well-being and step on others' toes to get my own satisfaction is what we call selfish. So notice I did not put selfish and selfless in the usual conventional way that we know. It's either selfish or it's either selfless. This is how we usually think, right? You're being selfish, you're being selfless. No, everyone does, this is the scriptures, everyone does things for their sake alone. Be honest. Look at this statement deeply, because this statement throws a lot of objection, I tell you. And I've heard this before. I said this once to, you know, to a student, and, you know, they're still my student. They love me, I love them. And they weren't able to understand this. They says, no, you know, I don't love my wife for my sake. We've made a lot of sacrifices and, you know, we have children. So these are all reasons to justify why you're with her. That's not what I'm talking about. Why are you ultimately with somebody else? Why are you ultimately surrounding yourself with a house, with food, with security, with knowledge, with friends? To please yourself, to enrich your life. And in doing so, you also enrich their life. We call this selfless.
I understood now.
Okay, lovely. Yay. Okay. What else does the Vedas say? It says one needs to, as I said, reevaluate one's life every once in a while. Self-compassion. There are books, I tell you, written just on one single topic, self-compassion. What else does the Vedas say? It says, let's change your experience, your interpretations about your experience. So what happens is we're often used to interpreting our experience, whatever that experience is. Someone says something to you or treats you in a certain way or sends you a rude email or, you know, communicates to you in a certain way. And then we often have a story that is the same story as the story of yesterday. And that story is the same story as the story 1 month ago. You understand? So one needs to come in and say, wait a minute, is my story that I'm telling myself about what is happening, is it bringing peace to my mind? Is it keeping with the facts, or is it embellishing it with what we call biases, with personal assumptions, with presumptions, with, you know, with things that are just not entirely true? In other words, by looking at my stories, I simultaneously change how I feel about the world. In fact, what is depression? Let's look at depression for a moment. What is depression? Does depression happen like that?
Living in the past.
Living in the past, right? And okay, and I'll ask this: what results to depression? What takes place for depression to manifest?
It's the stories that you are telling yourself all the time.
All the time. In other words, I mean, not all the time, but for a long time, right? So in other words, once upon a time, everything was okay. And something happened, right? And someone told me, no, it's your karma, it's your destiny. And I kind of took that on. I didn't really know what the word karma or destiny meant, but then I added new additions onto it. And what happened through the course of time, I forgot my initial sadness. I forgot my initial pain, my initial thought that brought me depression, that brought me sadness. And through the course of time, the individual has been adding so many stories that a month or 3 months later, the story is totally different, no connection to the original, like no whatsoever. And now they call, I'm depressed. And then they go to a psychologist's office and they say, tell me about your life. What are you depressed about? And what does the individual start to pour out? All of the additions that have no connection to the original thought that happened a year ago. And then the psychologist has a very hard job to try to figure out, my God, what is the real cause here? So the psychologist has to drill through all of these stories that the person is saying and come to the root cause that has started this depression, which has lasted for a whole year. So in that same way, one has to ask themselves, are the stories that I'm telling myself encouraging me? Are they making me a more discerning, wiser, more intelligent, more loving individual? Or are they just taking away this humanity that I've been blessed by the Lord and just making me into this lesser person who's just complaining, finding faults in others, which is the easiest thing to do? Which one of them is it doing? And so the person has a little conversation with them and becomes very sensitive to what this amazing instrument is telling it. Because this instrument, as I said earlier, has the capacity to do the most amazing things, but equally it can start wars, it can end lives, it can do all sorts of things. Vinny?
Yes, so just a quick thing. So is depression more of like that you have an issue, you're thinking continuously about the issue, but you're not taking any action about it. Like instead of solving the core problem, you're just thinking and then kind of making stories, and which becomes a big trouble, right? Over time.
Yeah, this is a very good point. So what Vinny is saying is that there's two options. Sometimes the individual will come to you and they will have a conversation and you will listen to them. But if you kind of look at the individual's intentions, it's not really asking for any real solution. It just wants to offload. And that alone can help them. Another option is the person come up to you and borrow your 2 ears to say something, and you give them some, and suppose they ask, they even come to you and ask, and you naturally want to respond and give them some information. And then you see a month later or 2 months later, and I know some individuals like this because the teacher sees a lot of things, and the exact same complaints, exact same issues are popping up. In other words, the individual has no real interest in taking the advice, in taking the wisdom and doing something of their own life and making their life adding some changes. It's just the same complaints. And then you have to make a course correction. You have to ask yourself, do I continue my relationship with this person and do I set boundaries? Because there's an 80-20 rule. The 80-20 rule says that in business, 20% of your complaining customers will take up 80% of your time. 20%. So all of your customers, right? Suppose you got 100 customers. 20 of those customers will take up 80% of your time. And who are those 20 customers? The ones who are not really looking for a resolution. They just want to complain, basically, more or less. And this is a kind of a statistic across the board in any kind of business that you do. You'll kind of figure out there's a range of customers, those who want to find a solution, those just who want to complain, and those who want to have a conversation with you, but still they backstab you by leaving you a bad review. Now that's kind of very hard to manage, but there's all kinds of people. So yes, one has to be discerning. Am I saying this? What is my intention behind saying what I'm saying? Is it to make a transformation in my life, or is it just to vomit out the same stories I've been telling for years or months or days, and just to borrow your 2 years? And how much favor am I really giving you by vomiting on your face with my stories without asking for any help? Not a lot, right? So in other words, now this becomes my own papam. This becomes my own demerit to have to deal with. In other words, right, what is my intention for talking to you? Is it to make a change, or is it just to kind of just pour out? In fact, in the Vedas, there's a beautiful model that I absolutely love. And this model is a communication model. And this model has 4 stages. That means there's 4 kinds of conversations that you can have, more or less. There's many more, but more or less. Look at this. The first kind is what's called jalpa. What is jalpa? Well, we all know this one. This is whereby you get invited and it's just chit chat. So basically, at the end of the conversation, 2.5 hours, you analyze what really took place. And the whole thing was just games, chit chat, sharing past memories, jokes, laughter, right? Just kind of, which is okay. But all of the time basically went into just chit chat. And you ask yourself, was there any real value end of the day? Or was it just kind of a little bit of emotional satisfaction for 1.5 or 5 hours? What was it? And you say, well, it was more or less just emotional satisfaction. The second type is what we call vitanda. Vitanda is whereby I talk to you and you talk to me. And we're very mature people, we have our tie there, and, I respect you, you respect me. But, and we're, back and forth here. But I have no interest in considering your point of view. I'm just waiting for you to finish, and you're waiting for me to finish. And then I maturely provide my standpoint. No, this is how it is. Oh, now let me listen to you. Interesting. So here's how it is from my side. So it's just whole thing of, right? I have no interest in really buying your view. I'm just saying my part, you saying your part, and we're both wise. We both look on the outside, all, having a professional conversation, but no real connection is happening. There's no real connection. Do you know these conversations? Do you know the first one? Chit chat. The second one, they both know a lot, but end of the day, there's no real learning. The fourth connection is vada. Vada is whereby you are with your friend, with your partner, with your colleague, with your spouse, with your child, and you have a deep connection, a heart-to-heart connection. You spend time with them, and you two are able to go deep into the matter. You're able to drill deeper and deeper and deeper into something. You say something, and they add, and they send both of you even deeper. And you say something, and you go even deeper or higher, whichever way you want. And end of the day, you ask yourself, do I feel rejuvenated by this? Absolutely. Do I have the energy to continue doing my work even after 5 hours of conversation? Absolutely. Have I learned something about myself? Totally. Have they gone through a transformation? Yes. Even if it's little, it's good enough. It was still productive. It was still highly rejuvenating, inspiring, and it brought you a different perspective about life. Ideally, these are the best kinds of relationships where you and your friend, you and your relative or loved one, you have a real connection. And you are every single time you connect, you can dance, you can laugh, you can have vitanda, chit chat, you can have a little bit of back and forth, but in and through all of that, you have also deep connection, which is so precious and so welcoming. It's the best kind of communication you can possibly have. Do you know these kind of connections? They're brilliant. They're beautiful. Yes, Gary.
Do you think that, do you strive to follow the 80-20 principle, only like make sure that rather than 80-20, that you just have like maybe 80% people that are productive in your life, rather than usually you think of an employer has, 100 people and 20% do most of the work, it's.
Mm-hmm. I think in real life, it's not so easy to categorically say, I only want this type or only want this type, because sometimes there are some harder people in your life that give you a hard time, but you can even convert that, Carrie, into something that is, in fact, the toughest communications that I've ever had are the ones who brought me most change. Because you have to really look into your character. How do I respond professionally and retain my own composure? And how do I communicate in such a way that I can still hold that space of genuine, right, productivity, of genuine communication, to keep that platform open on which communication can happen. So in that, you can make some adjustments and put some boundaries, or maybe answer less often, or anything that you can think of to protect your own well-being too. But at the same time, you need to address to the customer's needs. So this is a very valid question. But otherwise, I don't personally see it as a totally get rid of all of the unproductive people in my life, right? Only keep the productive people. It's a little bit too rigid, and it sounds too see, you don't ever know the person completely. They may be like this today, but in 2 weeks or 1 year from now, you can have a totally different person. So for me to kind of discard them completely, it's not keeping the bigger picture in view. So that's why we have boundaries. We need to set some boundaries so we can protect our well-being and keep them in our life, because there's some value there. But at the same time, you need to sustain your own life because you're busy and there's a lot of attention that is being wanted. And, you have studies. And so you need to make that work too for yourself. So again, it comes to what Il was saying. It is, yes, you are pleasing yourself, but also you are doing what has to be done. That means you're still accounting the well-being of other individuals while simultaneously setting boundaries for yourself. Verse 2. Okay, so what's happening now is Dhritarashtra has asked Sanjaya what is going on, and Sanjaya will reply, and he will say that Duryodhana is going to talk to his teacher Drona. Sanjaya uvacha Drishtva tu Pandavanikam Yudham Duryodhanastada Acharyam Upasangamya Raja Vachanam Abravit. Sanjaya says, so Sanjaya Uvacha, what happens? Duryodhana is going up to Drona teacher. Now, who is the head of the army for the Kauravas? Bhishma is the head of the Kauravas army. So the question is, why is Duryodhana going up to Drona and not Bhishma? Arsha?
He was his teacher.
He was his teacher. Okay, that's one possibility. There could be reasons why he wants to consult him or he wants to tell him something.
He's looking for confirmation bias. Bhishma may not be able to confirm or big up Duryodhana because he might be feeling a bit weird about the whole situation with the war. And he's going more to the teacher to confirm his haughtiness.
If you don't like that person, or if you have some negative emotion like anger or envy,
right? Okay, that's great thinking. So maybe Drona is holding some kind of grudges or some resentment, and we don't know, right? So therefore, he doesn't feel comfortable going up to Bhishma. Okay, look at this. Drona knows something that
Bhishma doesn't.
That Bhishma doesn't, right? So Drona needs to hear it, right? So that Drona can perform to the best of his abilities. Maybe. So look at this. There's no actual answer here. Bhishma was the grandfather and loves Pandavas a lot. Yes, there is. Okay, so
and was Drona also the teacher of the Pandavas, and thereby he would have knowledge that the Pandavas of what the Pandavas might choose to do?
This is an answer that's closest to what I want to say. Duryodhana is not confident and he can win. He went on Drona, but not on Bhishma. Okay, so maybe he's feeling more confident with Drona and not Bhishma. So these are all true reasons. See, what I'm doing here is I'm just engaging your mind because you have to kind of go inside the psychology of another person. Okay, remember Bhishma, he had a vow, right? What was Bhishma's vow? He said, no matter what, I'm going to stay on the Kaurava side to protect Hastinapur and whoever the king is on this side. Duryodhana knew about that. So he knew that Bhishma is not going to waver no matter what. He's going to stay on the side of the Kauravas. So he was completely confident that Bhishma is going to stay with us. But was the same case with Drona? No, why not? Duryodhana was worried that Arjuna, right, because he is his favorite student, Drona may change his mind. Because there was a story where when both the Kauravas and the Pandavas were young, there was a bird, and Drona asked all of them, what do you see up there? And they said, well, I see a tree, I see a bird, I see a wing, and all of these, things that are obvious. But then Drona asked Arjuna, and he says, what do you see? And he says, I only see one single pupil of the right eye. That's all I see. What is this? Brilliance, concentration, How can you not love a student this sharp? But this was also, I tell you, Drona's weakness. He had a bias, and we will see later on what Drona, in a sense, represents, because he is a great teacher, but his biases were also his weakness. But why did Drona end up on the side of the Kauravas when Drona had no vow? Drona had a son, Ashwatthama. Okay, so Ashwatthama was a friend of Duryodhana, and for that reason, Drona wanted to, out of his love for his son, protect his son Ashwatthama. And therefore, he wanted to ensure that nothing happens to his son. So for that reason alone, he stood on the side of the Kauravas. But at the same time, Duryodhana knew that he could in any moment change his view and go to the other side, as someone said, because Arjuna was one of his favorite students. So in other words, what he wants to show you here is that we all have a sense of what is right and wrong, all of us. That is a natural program that we all come with. But everyone, along with that program, has a personal reasons for going on one side to the other. You see this? So Drona, what was Drona's issue? He was naturally in touch with, because he was a teacher, with what is right and wrong. But owing to his own personal reasons, personal considerations, he says, I'm going to stay on the side of the Kauravas. So what does this mean? It's very hard to know why people make decisions. You never quite know what are their personal considerations for choosing one over the other. It's very easy to assume, well, they're not, educated, they're not in touch with the ethics, they're not a real teacher. But if you look deeper and deeper and deeper, everyone, despite knowing what is right and wrong, has personal considerations for choosing what they chose. Understanding this, I can be more accommodative toward people's so-called irrational decisions, because to them, it makes sense. Can you call Drona a bad person for staying on the side of Kauravas? Can you call him an evil, a stupid, a fool? It's not that simple. It's not so black or white. There are personal considerations. So therefore, it wants to show us that before we have a temptation to brush off someone as whatever label, there are reasons upon reasons why they are choosing to be on the other side, why they are choosing to disregard you, even if you know you are a brilliant, a well-educated, a discerning human being, someone just doesn't like you. You had this experience before? Right? You're doing the best you can. I know, Vinny, you're interested in the scriptures. You're interested in the Lord's wisdom. And someone doesn't like you. They've got a problem with you. And you're like, are you kidding me? I've been working on myself for 20 years. You don't know what their personal considerations are. Even if they're in touch with what is right and wrong, it's very hard to know. So this means I need some objectivity on my side, not to be taken for a ride, because now I can start thinking what a fool they are, and that's going to affect whose mind? Your own mind. Goodbye, peace.
I just want to understand this a bit more. So as an individual, right, I might know what's right and wrong, right? But my decision might be clouded by either confirmational bias or other areas, right? My experiences and so on. So how do we identify, or how do we practice this, to kind of listen or do the right thing, without having some bias involved?
Good. So the question is, yes, we all come with a natural program of what is decent, what is fair, but at the same time, we are driven by our own personal considerations. Now, how do I know whether my action is coming out of my personal consideration? How much of my motivation is out of personal consideration, and how much is it also keeping with the needs of the whole? See, it's very hard to know this until you have actually done it and you saw the feedback that you have received. The ultimate indicator is what the world is giving you. That's why I need a certain composure not to brush off people as just fools, because those very, quote, fools are the ones who can educate me how well, how educated, how discerning my investment, my action into the Kurukshetra is. If they respond negatively, I tell you, it's very easy to just brush them off and say they don't know what they're talking about. But everyone is in touch with universal ethics. And so through the feedback of the world, does it make me someone that I feel proud for having done what I have? Do I feel ashamed of having done what I have? Do I feel fearful and I want to now hide as a result of doing what I have done? Just like I said the other session, after I communicate with someone through an email, would I feel proud and just completely innocent and motivated to go up to them if I were to accidentally see them tomorrow in the bathroom? Or would I quickly hide away? Oh no, I said that last day. I better hide. I feel ashamed of, I totally was unprofessional. I was not, keeping with, I was not considering them as a human being. I'm hiding away.
Okay.
So that sense, feedback is your greatest gift as to how educated, how discerning was your previous action. That would be the answer.
Sorry, just a follow-up question here. So feedback can be biased as well, right?
Yeah.
Based on the other person's interaction or experience with you, right? Like it could be coming from any emotion, like, a selfish motive or anger or like, all those
Absolutely.
things. So how do you then like differentiate or identify which feedback to take and which feedback to discard?
Yeah, this is very common where someone does give you feedback. See, here's the truth, more or less. There's no absolute, but here's a fact. When someone gives you feedback, there is always a percentage that is keeping with something that you can learn from. And the other percentage, now you cannot quite tell how much, is also their own biases. You cannot ever receive a feedback from someone whose biases haven't polluted that feedback. This is a fact. Because as a human being, we all carry biases. It's impossible, capital letters, impossible not to have biases. Understand?
Yes,
Everyone carries.
true.
The only thing I can do in reference to my biases is get more discerning so I can reduce my own biases and have more objectivity. But when it comes to other people, you have to be a little bit discerning. This is why it's in it for you to get educated about reality so that you can be careful and not take it so personally. So the question now is, how do I know how much is their stuff and how much is my stuff? I'll tell you a way how I deal with this. When I receive some criticism from, I love to receive feedback, right? When I do a retreat, I will ask the students, please give me some feedback. Not all of them, but I will ask some retreats, give me feedback. Why do I want to receive feedback? I just said, feedback is the world is your greatest educator. And I read those feedbacks, and generally it's all positive. But then I also specifically say, don't just tell me good things, to make me feel good. I want to hear what can I improve by? And people will say things. And I will read, and they're all lovely feedbacks, but every once in a while, I get what I would just define a little bit too strong. Like this is all dogma, this is all belief, there's no karma, there's no reincarnation. And I'm like, wait, you're just brushing this off so quickly without even really looking at the logics, the bigger picture, you're just kind of throwing it away. So through this, I can see that their pressure to give feedback is arising from some form of personal belief they're holding towards the teaching, and then projecting it onto how Andre has no clue what he's talking about because he's talking about dogma, reincarnation, you can't prove it. And this usually comes from, Christians because it's very hard thing to kind of incorporate, past life, which we will go through, by the way. So I tell you, hold off your opinion before brushing off things so quickly. It only says something about your mind than somebody else's mind. The least I can do is ask, give me something that I can relate with so I can understand this, rather than just this quick feedback and just, it leaves you alone in the dust. So in this case, I say, no, this has got nothing to do with me. This is a personal thing. In other words, what I want to say, Billy, is that you have to be discerning. How much from this can I learn and how much of this is their own stuff? It's impossible
Like
to tell.
self-reflection, right?
Yeah, exactly, self-reflection. So you have to ask yourself and you have to be discerning.
Okay, thank you.
Gautam, and then someone else there.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, we see this, conflict and dilemma or a mental tug of war in Drone. He has to take a stand with his employer, who is he's an employee of Hastinapur. So he has been employer for long, and therefore it's difficult for him to switch sides. And secondly, he has his own son who's affiliated with the Kauravas. And then there's the sense of righteousness. There becomes a conflict of war, whether to be with his employer who has been around for so long, vis-a-vis go there. The same type of a thing we see in Ramayana also, wherein Ravana's two brothers, Kumbhakaran goes with the Bhratri Dharma, that he has to stick with his brother, being his brother. And Vibhishan, he has to stick with righteousness. So there's the tug of war, a conflict between just two brothers there. And similar tug of war is either being with righteousness or being with his own employer.
See, Dronacharya, he was put in a spot of the Kauravas and he was employed there, sure. At the same time, you have to ask yourself, what is the cost for me being employed in this situation? Is there a cost of my own well-being? Is there a cost of my peace? And then you have to make the right decision, and you can also change, because you're never quite stuck in any situation. Sometimes people will complain, oh, I'm in this job, I can't do anything about it. And they just keep on building more narratives, more stories, and it doesn't really serve you. So you have to ask yourself, I am employed in this situation, but is it something that does it really inspire me? Does it allow me space to grow? And if it doesn't, it's never too late, because you can still convert any situation into a learning experience. As I said in a previous session, any opportunity, any crisis, any challenge is an amazing opportunity for your transformation. Nothing really hinders you unless you allow it to hinder you. So even Vidur, right? Vidur was on the side of the Kauravas, and he was very wise. And he had such discernment that he was able to retain his composure, his wisdom, and support Dhritarashtra and not take it personally because he was not listened to. Imagine this. You're wise, you're discerning, and you're giving a lot of good information, and the person is not doing anything about it. Would you take that personally? Think about how strong you would have to be to just do what you have to do. You are put in this situation. Now I have to provide a platform of wisdom to help this individual to the best of my abilities. But where we go sometimes off track is we take it personally and we say, no, they're not listening to me. Why should I say more information? It's just going to be the same story as yesterday. And so this is where you start to add your own additions. And it doesn't help you, nor does it help your larger environment. So sometimes we have to take a stand, be where we are, and do the best that we can without taking these personal matters into as if something's wrong with you. You're just doing the best you can. You're educating yourself. You're keeping with the truth. You're keeping with the scriptures. If someone has a problem with that, there's not much you can do about it. You can communicate in a loving manner. You can kind of give them, some space to share their wisdom, but there's not much that you can do about it. So this means you have to be very strong when it comes to, being who you are and letting yourself shine without letting people put you down and tell you how you can't, how you're not brilliant, how you're not shining, because as I said, you are doing the best you can. And this is the truth. So what Duryodhana is doing now is he's going up to Drona and he's giving him a little pep talk, a little motivational talk. And this is very common. The coach goes up to his players or her players, right? And they give them some affirmation, some words of positive wisdom, just to remind them, hey, you guys are brilliant. Even if you think of yourself as a small individual, you're not. You play a larger role in this big picture, in this big puzzle, as I used that metaphor last time. You are a piece of the puzzle and you make a huge difference. So Duryodhana wants to bring this out and help Drona see, you are a great archer, you're a great teacher, and I just want to let you know that, we need your help. And you can help us. You are on the right side. So this is something else that we can take from this. So sometimes we're frustrated, right, by others' performance. But then you ask yourself, what can I do? You know, am I making it harder for the individual, or am I providing a healthy platform for this individual to shine? There's always something that you can also do. So in this case, Duryodhana is providing that platform of security and some motivation to draw the best out of his fighter, out of his teacher. So in that sense, we can see that it's a collaboration. It's not just like, oh, you're the teacher, I'm the student, and me, the teacher, I'm supposed to, please everyone, and I'm supposed to know everything. I don't. This is a fact. So this means the teacher needs the student, and the student needs the teacher. The student needs and helps the teacher to bring out the best out of themselves, and the teacher equally helps the student, reminds the student, hey, you are much greater than you think you are. There's so much potential in you, and this potential is my job to bring out of you throughout this long course that we will have for a couple of years. So welcome. You're going to be spending time with me for some years, not months. And my job is to bring out the best out of you, because that's exactly what my teacher does for me. Some people will kind of drop out maybe in a couple of months, and that naturally happens. But I will be here no matter what, continuing until we have done chapter 18, last verse. This is how far I can see so far. So it's a collaboration. Both are working together. Now I want to bring it into Ramayana, as Gautam said. There was a scene where Sita was in Lanka and Hanuman or on the seashore, and he was so discouraged by recognizing he has to go across the ocean to find Sita. Now, Hanuman is a very interesting character. So when he was young, he was a brave, talented boy who had some magical powers. And he's a kind of mischievous, as we all are, most of us are when we're young, uses some power to lift the girl's dress up and embarrass her, things like that. So in that sense, Hanuman was mischievous. And one day he looked at the sun and he thought the sun was a fruit. And I believe he wanted to eat the sun, or bring the sun closer. But what happened was Indra recognized, he's the Deva, recognized this is disturbing the cosmic law. You cannot touch the sun. We all need the sun. It is healthy for all of us. This is crossing boundaries. So Indra used his Vajra thunderbolt, and he struck Hanuman, and it distressed Hanuman so much that he forgot. Naturally, he forgot, because he was so distressed by this consequence, that he forgot his bravery, he forgot his confidence, he forgot his wisdom. He kind of lost himself a little bit there. So he was living as an individual, but not to the fullest of his capacities. So what happened is, when he came to the shore and he wanted to go to Sita, he thought, I can't do this. And what happened? Jambavan, who is the king of bears, don't think of it as a real bear. Otherwise, you start to think now, how can you have a bear and a monkey? That's called bear eats monkey. So these are all metaphors. King of bears means someone that's powerful, someone that's brave, someone that's wise. Jambavan, the king of bears, who was wise of himself, he contacted many sages, so he knew a lot of things. He contacted the Sharatha, who was the father of Rama in Ayodhya. So he came up to Hanuman and says, hey, wait, you, my friend, are much more than you think you are right now. You think you are this person. You are so much more. You are strong. You are brave. You have the capacity to cross any challenge if you put your mind to it long enough. And Jambavan slowly weaved this tapestry of, removed his doubts. And so like this, we're all Hanumans. We have so much potential, but we walk around with self-doubt. I can't. I'm not good enough. This is not for me. I'm too old. I should have started this earlier on. I'm not a good speaker. I'm not a good listener. I can't remember. My memory is failing. I don't have a good memory. Does this sound familiar? I don't live in the right country. I don't live in the right place. My spouse is a problem. My children are a problem. They're taking all my time. Hard work at job. My pay is not big enough. Problem, just issue after issue after issue. But so much more there is in you. You can think differently. You can have a different attitude about it. So like this, self-doubt was removed from Hanuman, which is the very purpose of this course. And what happened? Hanuman found this strength, remembered who he really is as an individual. And he was able to accomplish something that is amazing. Cross an ocean of samsara and find Sita and help out and send a message and cause some, turmoil there with his tail being set on fire and whatever else he did over there. So this is another amazing reminder that there's so much is stored inside you, but then the world comes by and says, no, you can't, you're not good enough, and then we get buried, pushed down, pushed down, pushed down, pushed down. And then by the time we come to the Gita, and I say to you, you are the whole, there's nothing missing, you are full. And the individual is still thinking, yeah, that's nice, sounds nice, yeah, but that's only for the wise ones, that's only for Buddhas, only for Ramana Maharishis, only for Adi Shankaras, it's only for them. Me, I'm just a small person. I had the same thing, I tell you. I remember just like 5 minutes ago, when I began teaching, it was like, who am I? I'm just a white nobody, a white Westerner, a nobody. This is not for me, this is for others out there, this is for the Indians. But then later on, you realize there's no difference. Indians have the same issues as a Westerner has the same issue as a South American. It's all the same. So there was a self-doubt there. And I had to work through that self-doubt to recognize, hey, I can't do this. So that took time. It took years. So it's not an overnight work. There's work involved. It's years involved. So we're not talking months. We're talking years, decade at least. But then the mind comes in again, says, no, I can't do this, a decade, it's too long. Again, the teacher says, pause, just pause. Look at your thoughts, how no matter what, they want to sabotage you. For a moment, just pause them and recognize, if I've been thinking like this for a decade or 5 years, I can equally think differently because the capacity of choice is given to me all the time. And I have to reclaim that capacity of choice and start to use my mind, instrument differently to find this potential and exercise this potential, just like Hanuman did. And who has that power? You have that power, just like Hanuman had that power all along, until a teacher like Jambavan came over and reminded him. Verse 3, Duryodhana wants to boost Drona's moral a little bit further. So let's see what verse 3 says. Pashyaitam pandu putranam acharya Mahitim chamum yudham drupada putrena tava shishyena dhimata. So Duryodhana here is just reminding Drona, his teacher, to look at the opposing army. So teacher, Drona, look at the opposing army. And what was this opposing army consisting of in the verse? It was consisting of Drupada, the father of Draupadi. Who else? Drishtadyumna. Drishtadyumna is the brother of Draupadi, and he was the head of the Pandavas army. So again, he wants to psychologically boost the morale of Drona. And now the next verse says, what does Duryodhana do? He wants to narrate who specifically are these great warriors on the other side. So 4, 5, and 6. Atra shura maheshwasaha bhimarjuna samayudhi yuyudhano viratascha drupadascha maharathaha drishtaketushche kitanaha kashirajascha viryavan purujit kunti bhojascha shaibhyascha narapungavaha yuddha manyushcha vikrantaha uttamaujascha viryavan Saubhadro Draupadeyascha Sarva Eva Maharathaha. In verse 4, 5, and 6, Duryodhana highlights who are the difficult to defeat people on the other side. And who are they? Arjuna, Bhima. Now, Bhima is the brother of Arjuna and Draupadi's brother. Now, Draupadi, she also had a very important role in the Mahabharata story. And as we know, she was disrobed. And because this happened to her, she was holding Yudhishthir responsible. So in a sense, this is good because she was a strong woman. She said what was on her mind. She spoke out. She was not kind of just obedient and kept it silent and being, you know, sort of a submissive wife. She really voiced out what was on her mind, what was heavy on her heart. And she was holding Yudhishthira responsible because, you know, understandably so, Yudhishthira did play a huge role in her disrobing. So in this sense, this is Draupadi's strength. She's a wife who says what is on the mind. But at the same time, Draupadi had a weakness. What do you think Draupadi's weakness was? Okay, so remember when Draupadi was at Indraprastha and there was a pool and Duryodhana fell in that pool. And what did Draupadi do? She laughed at him. She insulted him. So Draupadi's weakness was her arrogance. She was arrogant in a few scenarios. And we can see this about her in this first case where she just sort of dismissed Duryodhana and just also contributed to the war. And that is why Duryodhana wanted her disrobed, because of the insult that she gave to him when he fell inside the Indraprastha pool. The second is when what happened is before the war was about to take place, Krishna was speaking to the Pandavas and he said to them, I'm going to go to Hastinapur and attempt to resolve this matter for one last time. So I need to, divert this war because there are many lives at stake. And while he was saying this to Pandavas, Draupadi overheard this. And she came up to, and she interjected and she said, Krishna, you are not an ordinary man. You are very influential in your words. If you go over there to Hastinapur and divert the war and stop the war, then how will I get my revenge for what has happened to me? How will I, get my, payback for what Duryodhana and Dushasana have done to me? And what did Krishna say? Draupadi, I empathize with your hurt. It is understandable that what has happened to you is unspeakable. It is, no one can be treated like that. But this war isn't just about your hurt. It isn't just about your insult. There is something much larger here at stake. There are two armies and lots of lives, thousands of lives will be lost and the society will be impacted. So I have to divert this naturally. I empathize with you, but don't lose perspective. This isn't just about you. Draupadi was a great woman, but at the same time, she was thinking about a little bit too much in some scenarios about herself. Draupadi had a brother, and brother was Drishtadyumna, and because of what has happened to her, she kind of poked him, says, hey, this has happened to me, brother, and you're a great guy, and I want you to be leading the Pandavas army. And for this reason, her brother ended up being the leader of the Pandavas army. So in other words, she got her brother to really, amp up the whole army for whose sake? For her sake, in that sense. So this was Draupadi's contribution to the entire war. So she too played some part, one or the other. Okay, doesn't Drishtadyumna become a commanding leader because he is destined to kill Drona? I'm not sure about this, and therefore not due to Draupadi's influence. As far as I know, Draupadi has added onto the fire, but you could be right here. I'm not exactly sure. So the second character is Virata. And Virata was a king who protected the Pandavas in their 13th year of incognito. And what happened was when Duryodhana was about to attack them on the 13th year, the Virata's kingdom, the Pandavas stepped in and says, no, please step aside. We five will take care of this because you have done so much service to us, and we will naturally, we will fight them. And so the Pandavas did that, and Virata felt very obliged to be on their side. Who else? Abhimanyu. Who is Abhimanyu? Abhimanyu is the son of Arjuna. And Arjuna had two wives, Draupadi and Subhadra. And Subhadra was the sister of Krishna. So what does this say? And Abhimanyu was one of the youngest fighters in the army. So what can we see here? Even if you are young, even if you are kind of youthful, what was Abhimanyu? Brilliant, skillful, worthy. So even if you're someone that's young and still getting into this, what happens is the world doesn't necessarily provide us the right platform unless you live in a gurukulam or you're in a some institution, like we got the Mensa research here in Australia that is for talented kids with high IQs. Unless you are held by them there, then sure, you can shine. But just imagine how many kids are in this world, how much young talent exists in this world, and nobody is to see you there, right? You just don't have the right platform to shine. And even if you do shine, most adults being busy and they don't really think for themselves, basically, then they see someone that's shining, and what do? You're just a kid. What do you know? But that's just a projection of my own adulthood or lack of skills onto the other individual. So like this, Abhimanyu was a brilliant, young, skillful archer, and he was put in an environment, that Pandavas, that gave him the opportunity to shine. And for this reason, he was in this army. So again, we can see, just think about how many children right now are yearning to be seen because they know, in fact, they don't even know because no one gave them a chance to know, but they are brilliant in every respect. But they're born in an environment, or parents are like this, or the school kids or the bullies. You go to school and then you're smart. What happens? You become the subject of bullyhood, right? So much talent is in this world right now, but it's unseen because of the way that the world is set up. So this is another thing to consider, because we often think, where's all the intelligence gone? We used to have all the good people in the Satya Yuga. Now we don't have any talent. There is a lot of talent here. It's just that the world is not necessarily in a place to support or to give birth to all of that. So talent never leaves. Even if you have a new cycle of creation, talent never leaves. It's not like now the Upanishads gets burned and the Mahabharata is burned, and it's like, where's all this knowledge gone? The knowledge is going to come. Every cycle of creation is going to come through someone, because there's always a talented individual who gets born and is sensitive enough to detect there is something much more here than just the kind of eating and procreating and so on. So there's a lot of talent in this world, and we need to give, if we can, the chance for this talent to shine. Can anyone relate with this, where you were brilliant and you were shining, but you feel that you're unseen? So what is really different between then and now? Not much. It's just different buildings. We didn't have buildings back then, but human psychology is the same. I'm not going to go into the next verse. We will talk about Duryodhana will speak who are the warriors on the Kauravas side. And he's also going to reveal his insecurity. So far, what have we spoken about? Who are the great warriors on the other side, the Pandava side? Next verse, next session, we will speak about who are the warriors on the Kaurava side. And Duryodhana is going to indirectly reveal his insecurity. Because a person who is insecure doesn't say outright, I'm insecure, I'm afraid, I'm scared. But through their language, if you're very sensitive enough, you will pick out that they say things that reveals their conscience. They are in touch with conscience, but they're unable to get themselves to align with their conscience. And that comes out in a form of their speech. And this we will see next week.
I wanted to mention something about, you're talking about Drona and how he is an archetype of how people, or when we look at people, we can never know their background or their intentions.
Yeah.
And I thought it pertinent that we can also look at that, like not only just look at other people and be sympathetic to them, but when we're trying to understand our own motivations, sometimes we don't necessarily understand directly why we may do things or have done things in the past or how we behave now. So we can also look at ourselves that way, in the sense that we don't always quite understand what our motivations are, or specifically around instituting change. So you can get sort of stagnant and feel very static, or it's the inertia is very hard to overcome. So sometimes it's best to give yourself a break and understand that you don't always particularly know exactly why you are the way you are, and that you can give yourself that benefit of the doubt as well.
You
And
can also
start looking at your own motivations and maybe trying to understand why you think or do something the way you do it, rather than just try and make change, because sometimes the change can only come about when you understand your original motivations.
Yeah, which requires some circumstances to be delivered to you to show you a little bit more of what you simply could not see because those circumstances were not there before. So like you say, it's Michael, is that you need to give yourself some time, and that's why we in the Vedas, karma yoga, we have a certain way of going about your life, and that is through karma yoga, using the world to look at your your loopholes, your giving yourself opportunity to get to know yourself better, while still using that to purify your mind, to rethink your responses, to ask, is my response going to provide me peace, or is it going to just add more fuel to the fire or add more conflict to what I'm about to say? So constantly you're given this opportunity to look at your responses. In fact, it's not only a one-off, it's a constant work. And sometimes, even if it's a constant work, you need to be patient, because time is your greatest friend. Sometimes it just takes 1 or 2 or 3 years to make some small change. And I'll tell you, even in the classes, you can go for many months and you will find a small change. And then what happens on the 4th month or the 5th month? Something hits you huge. And you say, I should have just come on the 5th month. I wasted all my time coming on the 4th previous months. Is it like this? The irony is you needed to listen in the 4 months for that huge crescendo, that huge culmination to come on the 5th month and have a huge change. So also like this, we need to be patient with ourselves, because time really is there to help you to remove these deeply ingrained impressions, which take years to remove or have taken years to create. So how can you expect overnight change? It's like saying, hey, I want to become the tennis champion. And then someone's been practicing for 1 year. And then you call up to them and say, hey, how come you're not a tennis master? How come you're not playing against Djokovic? 1 year. 1 year. Can you really can you become a tennis champion in 1 year? No. It takes you a long time to become a champion, a master. To master your mind takes a lot of time. This is the reality. And nobody wants to hear this because it's painful. We're used to quick pill. Give me a pill, solve the problem. Give me a yogic technique. Give me some technique I can move my light up and down the spine, solve the problem. It's not like this. Real life demands, asks for your contribution. A rose to be so worthy of coming over and taking a whiff at, it took months to open up. So in that same way, the individual needs to open up slowly, slowly. And we will continue this next week as we continue to open up. Purnamada, Purnamidam, Purnat, Purnamudachyate, Purnasya, Purnamadaya, Purnam eva avashishyate. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.